Welcome to Conversations with Kay. I'm Kay Ryder, and every week I talk with Vermonters who are leaders in the fields of government, healthcare, education, the arts, and community life. We're in community life. I'm interviewing Lucy Samara, who's a super volunteer in our community. Lucy has done a lot of work with COTS and with the Refugee Resettlement program in Vermont, which is actually a national program. And a special welcome to our listeners on radio, 93.3 FM, WVTV-LP. Welcome, Lucy.
Thank you, Kay.
Nice to have you. How long have you lived in Vermont?
My family moved here in 1977, so 40 years this summer.
Great, great, yeah. Very good. I beat you. We came in 63. So. Do you recall the first time you volunteered for an organization where you said, well, they need me?
The absolute first volunteer experience I had was as a teenager. There was a child who was disabled, and at that time one of the treatments was a patterning, and two of us young teenagers would go to the home and move the child's legs and arms in a pattern that they felt would help the brain to recover from the injury that she had had. And I got very close with that family and did that for quite a while. And then in college, I really got involved with planning activities for students. I was involved with a student organization, and we had a photo lab and a poster printing business, and we ran lots of small concerts and events, and lots of folk singers we brought to campus, that kind of thing. And that's where I really started doing more event organizing and that kind of thing.
Well, that's great. I started in high school. Mm-hmm. My music groups collected food at Christmas and Thanksgiving for families who were having a hard time. And that's where I actually got started. And of course, my mother was the president of everything, so I volunteered my time for suppers for her organizations.
I think we often follow our families into volunteering. That's great.
Yep, right. What does COTS stand for, and what does it do, Lucy?
COTS is the Committee on Temporary Shelter. It was originally a grassroots community effort that started in the early 80s when we started to see an increase in homelessness nationally, and certainly here. And so COTS was a mix of city, social services, church folks who got together and formed this organization to provide emergency shelter. And that was in 1982, I believe, is when it started. And since then, COTS has really grown to not only be emergency shelter, but to be transitional housing, and to provide lots of case management and other services for people who are at risk of losing their housing and people who are without housing. And it's a very collaborative effort now.
Can you tell us how you got involved yourself volunteering for COTS?
Originally, I joined a committee at First Congregational Church of Burlington, and our task was to really look at the community, to understand what was happening in the community, what the needs were, and how we could respond. And that was in 1986, and homelessness was really growing, and so a group of us went out to really learn more about the services that were being provided, and I decided to get involved with COTS, and so a group of us pursued that, and I was very involved with that effort. Within about 18 months, the family shelter opened, and I had very young children at the time. This was in 1988. And we started a program where we brought our very young children to the family shelter and had a play group right there. So our idea was that we would be interacting with parents and our kids with their kids. It was a real community effort, and that's how I first got involved.
I know that the VNA brought health services to the there was in a firehouse, actually, yes. the yep. family shelter. Why is it so important for children to have a home, Lucy?
Yeah. I think this is just at the core in our culture to understand this, that stable housing for children really allows them to mature in the best way possible, to know where they're going to sleep at night, to feel safe, and to have nourishing food so that they really are free to learn and grow and develop. My interest in children and their vulnerability is really at the core of where I am as a person. And so that the family shelter was, of course, a real draw. And I also, with COTS, saw this as a very important community effort, and eventually got very involved with fundraising to support them.
Well, one of the big fundraisers is the walk. Tell
Yes.
us about that.
Yeah, well, the COTS Walkathon is an amazing event. This past first Sunday in May, it raised $200,000 for services and programs for COTS. It's a very important effort. It started in 1990. The year before, we had done a statewide bottle drive for COTS. It was called Cans for COTS, and it was at grocery stores all over the state, and it was a big effort. And I learned a lot about fundraising that summer. Friends, other volunteers, and I would be at a grocery store on a Saturday asking people for their returnables, and when they said yes, that was great, and it was a few dollars, and when they said no, I thought, this is not how to raise money for this very important cause. So that next January, I went to COTS and proposed that they, along with Gail Anderson, another volunteer, that we organize a walkathon. And
you were the one, huh?
Yes,
Good for you. Good for you.
And the idea was to raise awareness of the program so that people would walk from the shelter to the overnight shelter to the day shelter, and to really understand social services in our community. So we were raising awareness and raising money. The really wonderful thing that happened is that the board of directors at COTS, the staff at COTS, saw the support of the community, and that very first event we raised $28,000. Well over 800 people showed up and participated, and it was really a turning point where the community was really rallying around this organization to say, we really support you in what you're doing.
Well, good for you, Lucy. Congratulations as you started that. So that's just great, because you raise a good point, because seeing people you know perhaps, with signs and marching for a cause is different than somebody coming to your door and collecting bottles.
Yes, it is. And I also think that people care about this issue, but people have busy lives, they have full lives, they don't like the idea of people being without housing in their community, whether it's single adults or kids or veterans or people with, there's no one set description of someone without a home, except they need a place to sleep that's safe. And I do think people care about this, and the walk was really a start of a way for people to step into the organization and to really learn more and become more aware.
Well, now COTS has, in addition to the family shelters, you have the way station where homeless sleep at night, and you have the day station, noon meal, and COTS staff are there for support and to talk to people. But I think that you've been mostly involved with the families. Is that correct?
I've been involved in a variety of ways with COTS. The vast majority of what I've done has been around fundraising and working to engage the wider community at COTS. So I've been involved at the family shelter over time, and I've been involved with some other things. My husband and I are serving lunch there tomorrow at the day station. But the majority of my volunteering has been in fund development and volunteer recruiting and that kind of thing. Because I see that as a way to really involve a lot of people in supporting this very important work. COTS has a brand new facility. COTS purchased the Burlington College building at 95 North Avenue several years ago. It's been fully renovated, and it's just a beautiful facility, and it really represents the philosophy that COTS has about belief in the dignity of each person and the importance of affordable housing and shelter. So that facility now has the day station where people who are homeless or at risk of losing their housing can go for a safe place to meet with staff, for resources, noon meal, like you said. But it also has quite a few apartments that are transitional housing for people who've been homeless, and the staff offices are there, and it's really a great facility for our community. And it's a beautiful building now, too.
Do you offer tours? People want to see it?
Certainly. I think anybody could get in touch with COTS. I think the best thing is to go to the website, cotsonline.org, and contact the development staff. Becky Holt and Rita Markley are the two key people there. They can call and certainly go in and visit. Yeah.
What's the telephone number?
864-7402. And it's cotsonline.org. And there are lots of ways for people to be involved and to learn more.
Now, Rita Markley has been around COTS forever, it seems.
Yeah, she's a fabulous leader and executive director for COTS. Rita's really a visionary person, and I think one of the things that's really kept me involved there is that COTS has been very creative and has really listened and observed well what's happening in our community, what is needed. And so a lot of effort has been put into preventing homelessness, and some very ingenious and collaborative work has gone into that. So COTS will work closely with state economic services, with other nonprofits in the community to both identify people who are at risk of losing their housing and to pool resources to try to prevent that housing loss in the first place.
This is what I was going to ask you, because COTS, they say that housing is a fundamental right. And yet, the emergency shelters are not the solution to homelessness. Right. And you've just been talking about some of the ways to prevent homelessness.
Right.
And this is a big community effort, isn't it?
It is. It's a big community effort, and there are many partners and stakeholders involved. So there's a lot of collaborative work that happens between the different social service programs. Requires a lot of working together. The United Way is involved. The Howard Center, Spectrum has another branch of working with homeless where they work with youth. And all of those organizations work closely together. But this issue around preventing housing loss and being willing to put resources into that is a very important, innovative step that COTS has taken and is doing really good work with. The program is called the COTS Housing Resource Center. So if somebody's at risk of losing their housing and is hearing these words, they should contact the COTS Housing Resource Center, call the 864-7402 number, or look at the website and go and meet with staff there, and they will guide you through a process that can help you maintain your current housing if it's at all possible.
Well, that certainly is a wonderful step, particularly for a family.
Yes.
Because housing is so hard to find in Burlington particularly.
Right, and that's a key issue that every person who's in a crisis of potentially losing their housing, everybody's up against the cost of housing. The cost of living here is very high. And our wages for entry-level employment have stayed fairly low, and it's just very challenging to maintain housing, especially if people are working part-time, combining part-time jobs, if they don't have paid time off for sick time, that kind of thing can be very difficult.
Right. I think that a lot of people who are actually working, the so-called working poor, if you will,
right,
they are in danger of losing housing,
right,
food,
right,
health care,
right,
all these things. People talk about, am I going to buy food, or am I going to pay my rent,
right,
or my electric bill?
Right.
Now these are everyday problems for them, aren't they?
Right. It's and I think everybody should be aware of how much it costs to rent an apartment, and think about a $10 to $11 dollar an hour job, an apartment that's in the $1,200 range plus utilities, and try to make those numbers work. And it's very, very challenging to do, especially when there are children in the picture. You can see why single parents would have such a challenging time.
Well, I know that the United Way, now COTS is partially funded by the United Way. I know that United Way is taking the big picture now. looking at combining services to help people rather than, you know, just dollars spent on this, and this. I know that they're trying to look at the combination of services that people need.
Right. I think, you know, throughout the country and here, social service programs, the United Way being a leader in that, is really looking at collaboration and how organizations can work together. They, of course, want to avoid duplication of services, but want services to be measurable and effective. And I think, you know, what's really interesting to see is for the majority of people who experience a period of homelessness, that it's a brief period in their lives, and that the real importance that there be high quality services in place to encourage them and to lift them out of that immediate crisis.
Now, in your real life, you work for the First Congregational Church in Burlington.
That's right. I worked part-time at the First Congregational Church of Burlington as Director of Outreach Ministries since 1991. So I've been there for 26 years. And my role there has been to work with the congregation to, again, look at the community, see what needs are, and for us to respond, and for that to be a reflection of our faith and our beliefs and our values, and to really be engaged with creating healthy, positive community. So many people from the church have been active and volunteered through COTS and various other organizations, either as, you know, groups or individuals.
Well, I have to be honest, I'm a member of the First Congregational Church.
Yes, you
I have
are.
to let the audience know. And by the way, I don't want to forget about our listeners on 93.3 FM, WBTVLP. Welcome. I'm talking with Lucy Samara, who is a super volunteer in the community with COTS and with the Refugee Resettlement Program. So I have to be honest, I am a member of the church, and I know that the church is very mission driven.
Yes.
That's partly your work.
It is, and you know, we're right at the heart of the city. We're right at the top of Cherry Street on South Winooski Avenue, and the church is open many hours a day. We are a safe place for people. We house the Joint Urban Ministry Program, which is a wonderful emergency drop-in center for folks in need in our community. That being open, being a safe place for people is a very important part of our mission work, as well as our members going out into the community to be of service where they can.
So let's go on to the Refugee Resettlement Program. Now, this is a national program. You said it was run by the State Department.
It is.
However, as with all feds programs, local support and local initiative is what drives it. Why did you want to work on behalf of the Refugee Resettlement Program, Lucy?
For me, the place in my heart that is really open is about children. And imagining anybody going through the experience of being a refugee, losing their country. Often people have had, you know, very tragic, traumatic experiences. So you'd have a heart for any adult in that situation. And adults with children, trying to protect their children through such a challenging experience, is something that I was really drawn to. In 1994, we got a call from the Refugee Resettlement Program saying a Bosnian family was coming, and they had to go directly from the airport to the hospital. Their daughter would need dialysis as soon as she got here.
Wow.
So that family, who our community, our church community really rallied around that particular family, and their daughter eventually had a kidney transplant, and they are still in the community and are doing beautifully. I think they really opened hearts and minds and to the challenges of being a refugee. The idea that this child had a kidney transplant that was lost because in wartime you can't get the medications that you need. Let's just say the scales fell from my eyes of understanding even more so how difficult this experience would be. Eventually, our church was working with 17 Bosnian families in the resettlement process, and this was both effective outreach in the community to the new families, but it was also very engaging community activity for the church.
Right. Now, many of us have had, you know, where are you from? What's your ethnic background? You know, but there's a great deal of difference if your family decided to come versus if you had to get out.
And people who've had traumatic experiences, who've been exposed to war, to violence, to fear, you know, these are really shaping experiences, and the people cope with that in a variety of ways once here. They're presented with the challenges of adapting to American culture, to you know, very quickly learning how to be self-supporting, and getting a job, learning a new language, etc. These are big challenges, and you know, people handle them overall in a very resilient but very personal way.
It ain't easy, in other words.
It's not easy.
But it ain't easy. But these are very, very hardworking, diligent, and proud people, aren't they?
The people, I've been blessed to meet people from many, many countries, and the two countries in particular where, for me personally, I've been actively involved was first Bosnian resettlement, and then working with people from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And it has been a real education for me, and I have enormous respect for the folks who've come here and have worked so hard to adapt and to support themselves.
You have found this to be very rewarding volunteering.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Just, I should, you know, there are many stories that I could tell, the challenges that people have had, and what a difference it makes to have an American on your side, somebody who knows, somebody from this area, who knows the services, who knows where things are, who's willing to be patient with you and to help you get to know the systems here, to answer any questions, to create an atmosphere where any topic is a fair topic to discuss, to encourage your English. These are all really important things.
It's a big spectrum that's needed. When I was in high school, my Methodist church, my Methodist Episcopal church, brought a family from Latvia. And, you know, the same idea. You know, everything was provided when they got there. And that's one thing I love about the refugee resettlement program. Somebody can get off the plane and they are taken to where they will live and given a meal. And you know, isn't that just a marvelous concept? And it takes a lot of planning to have that ready, that meal and that housing, right?
Yes, and the refugee resettlement has just done a great job. It is a program of the State Department. The State Department contracts with a nonprofit to run refugee resettlement in our area, and they've done a beautiful job. Part of what they do is mobilize volunteers. Part of what they do is to make sure people are aware of the services that are available. It's basically an 8-month period of time where case management and finances are made available to people. It is not a luxurious start by any means. People work very hard to get themselves in a position after 8 months to pay their rent, many want to purchase a vehicle, learn to drive, and so forth. And it's really amazing to see how well the majority of people do.
Where would someone call to learn more about the Refugee Resettlement Program, Lucy?
The Refugee Resettlement Program in Vermont is 655-1963, so 802-655-1963. And there are many ways to be engaged as a volunteer, to donate material things for people's homes, to help them get set up, time, financial resources. They're really looking for that kind of support as people come in to the country.
Great. Now, it's not easy to become an American. I mean, it's not just language, it's customs, and the program tries to find people a home near transportation, because at first they don't have cars. And it's a big, big program. It's an all-encompassing program. But when you think about it, what a great thing. I mean, you know, like you said, you have a friend, and that's very important. And I'm talking with Lucy Samara, who's a friend of mine, and also we're talking about the Refugee Resettlement Program. So Lucy, let's talk about the problems that the program has right now. It's a national program. And I know that refugees from Syria right now are having very hard, difficult problem getting into our country.
Right.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I can't comment much on the overall political atmosphere, or we don't have that much time, Kay. But there have been times before where refugee resettlement has been slowed for political reasons, in a variety of ways. After 9/11, refugee resettlement was really slowed. What I can say is some of the impact of that. So, first of all, you have people in other countries who have been fully vetted to come here, who now cannot. They're more in holding pattern and waiting, and that means more strain on their families, more strain on health, and a delayed opportunity. And the way refugee resettlement programs are funded is that the funding is matched up with the number of people who are coming in. So the programs themselves can be vulnerable to losing funding and staffing, and then to gear up, they're having to hire new folks. So I don't know exactly what's happening with that in Vermont, but it's something to be aware of, that it's important that the programs keep going.
Yes.
And I think there's real reason for us to be supporting refugee resettlement and to be speaking out, using our voices locally and nationally to advocate for this. We have people who have brought wonderful cultural diversity into our community. We have children in our schools who are learning and doing beautifully. And if you, particularly Burlington and Winooski, because that's where the majority of the public transportation is, the most affordable housing is available there, you'll see many people employed at the hospital and different manufacturing facilities and so forth. There's a lot of employment that's really been enhanced by new Americans coming into the country. Often
we feel we can't do very much about big problems, but I think, in talking with you today, I think that one thing that has occurred to me is that we need to remember that we're a nation of immigrants.
That's right.
Our people came to this country for a variety of reasons, and the refugees today are still coming for the same reasons. They want a new life, and they want happiness for their children, and a path forward to the future. I thank you for all you've done in the community, Lucy.
Well, thank you. And it's been a fulfilling life for me.
Well, that's good. Life should be that way. Thank you for joining us, Lucy.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Conversations with Kay.